All right. We're good. All right. Chapter 29, finally. As we seemingly are picking up speed tonight, we're going to do quite a bit, just because of the way the chapter is laid out. But first, our reminders from last week, or the week before as well, or 2 weeks ago. What we saw in chapter 28 were a bunch of guidelines for a variety of offerings. A whole chapter is about different sacrifices and how to do them and how many animals and so forth. What I want to reiterate, and you see there in the handout, is as we went through those in chapter 28, back in June when we first started chapter 28, we read about daily, weekly, and monthly sacrifices. On the calendar, what Moses calls in chapter 28 elsewhere, regular, meaning they're on a schedule. We always do these no matter what. Also not included there, but don't forget there's also all the Sabbath sacrifices, your sin sacrifices, and so forth. Then, as we saw last week, chapter 28 ended by going over again, because it was covered earlier in the Pentateuch, regulations regarding the Passover and the Feast of Weeks, what we call Pentecost. So we went from daily, weekly, monthly, once a year, these big ones, Passover and Feast of Weeks. Now in chapter 29, this chapter covers sacrifices too. So we got more sacrifices coming. So if you got your Bibles handy and ready, let's go to chapter 29. We'll do our normal, we'll do a paragraph, we'll kind of cover some of the blanks on the handout, and then we'll do the next paragraph and so forth. Chapter 29, verse 1. On the first day of the 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. It is a day for you to blow the trumpets, and you shall offer a burnt offering for a pleasing aroma to the Lord. 1 bull from the herd, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old without blemish. Also their grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, with 1 male goat for a sin offering to make atonement for you, besides the burnt offering of the new moon and its grain offering, and the regular offering and its grain offering, and their drink offering, according to the rule for them, for a pleasing aroma, a food offering to the Lord. So the first offering, special occasion mentioned here, is what is known as the Feast of Trumpets. So this is a once-a-year event. This one takes place on the 7th month. So Passover is the first month, 6 months later, this one. And again, like we saw last week, a holy convocation is called. Remember, holy means set aside. Convocation means to be called together. So God is calling together, setting them aside. And all work, or as the text says in verse 1, ordinary work, stopped. In other words, regular things. Obviously, works of necessity are allowed, ordinary work. And the reason it's called what it is, of course, is that trumpets are used to call the people together, or in this case, to announce a special event. Right? This is their email and text chain. You come out with the trumpets, you blow them, people know something's going on, whether war, an enemy approaching, in this case, calling them together for the special occasion. It's almost like prelude music in a sense. Some of you also know that the trumpet is not like a brass instrument like we think. It's what is known as a shofar. It's a hollow ram's horn. I always think of the old movie 10 Commandments and Joshua and the army blowing them before they leave for the Exodus. But actually, during, I think it was Clinton's presidency, they had one of those special music events in a tent on the grounds of the White House. And, Phil, what's his last name? Christian musician. Was that? Was it Phil Keaggy? It might have been him, because he's a guitarist, right, normally? played the shofar with a mouthpiece and actually played a full song with notes in the whole 9 yards. And so pretty impressive. If it is Kagi, it's a Phil somebody. Been, I don't know, 30 some odd years since Clinton was president. It's starting to get a little blurry. But it's a shofar. And of course, the special event being announced here is not just the first day, this convocation, it's the fact that they're getting ready to celebrate the Day of Atonement. There you go, Phil Driscoll. Thank you, that's the one. There you go. So Phil Driscoll, thank you. There you go. No, you're good. Because I'm thinking, Kagi's a really good guitarist. I don't know about playing other instruments. I mean, I've been told that some people think Phil Kagi is maybe one of the best guitar players in America in his heyday. So, but yeah, Phil Driscoll, thank you. So it's the Day of Atonement that's being announced. And this whole month is going to be dedicated to it. Verse 2 then spells out for us the fact that there's another burnt offering here being prescribed. You're going to do this one on the first day of the 7th month. Purpose being, as we've seen over and over, even the paragraph ends reiterating this, that this was meant to be a pleasing aroma. Sacrifice it, you burn it, smoke rises to God and pleases him. The rest of the prescription for what's going to be sacrificed on this particular burnt offering is very similar to what we saw over and over in chapter 28 in terms of the number of animals, except that it calls for one bull, not two. So that should be the first alert as you're going through going, something unique about this one. And he lists the bull, the ram, the lambs. Then verses 3 and 4 talk about the grain offering that is to be included with the animals and how much per animal. So again, kind of following that pattern that we saw over and over in the previous chapter. Same thing with verse 5. Verse 5 spells out that there is to be, again, a goat offered, and also being offered for atonement. So every time there's a sacrifice of these natures that we've been looking at, and these ones mentioned, always the atonement goat also. And just to make sure something I was harping on last week, here's Moses harping on it. Verse 6, this new offering, the one on the first of the 7th month, is in addition to what he says is the new moon offering, which means the first day of the month, right? There's your monthly offering as well, and the daily offering. Because remember, the first day of the month, you got both normally. You got the first of the month, the new moon offering, and it got the daily offering. Now, if it also happened to fall on the Sabbath, it got the Sabbath offerings. In this case, if it fell on the Sabbath on the first day of the 7th month, you had all three of those plus this one on top of it. And so these are all in addition to. And I think part of the point that Moses is making, or God is making through Moses, is if we were to follow this system to a T, to include our sin sacrifices and all the other ones mentioned in Leviticus 1 through 7, you would never leave the tabernacle. In one sense, I think they're reiterating here for us the hopelessness of the situation. I mean, this is the 7th monthly atonement offering, plus all those other goats that have been offered. And by the way, it's the month of the Day of Atonement, so when we get to the middle of the month, there's more to be offered, and none of them can do it. And so the reader, the astute reader, is going, this is hopeless. As I tell my students, that's the point. That's why it is the way it is. It's not that the system is bad, it's that the people are worse. And they can't keep up with the system, even if it could directly save them in that sense. And so the problem is them, not the system. But Moses also reiterates there at the end of verse 6 that this is another food offering. And remember, we talked about this last week or maybe in June. The idea of a food offering is sitting down with God and fellowshipping. So these offerings are what enable you to fellowship with God. Except you got to keep doing it over and over and over and over again. But the goal is always community or communal nature of the relationship with God. So we've got the Feast of the Trumpets, first day of the 7th month. All right, now let's go to verse 7 in that paragraph. On the 10th day of this 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation and afflict yourselves. You shall do no work, but you shall offer a burnt offering to the Lord, a pleasing aroma. 1 bull from the herd, 1 ram, 7 male lambs a year old. See that they are without blemish. And their grain offering shall be of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs. Also 1 male goat for a sin offering, besides the sin offering of atonement, and the regular burnt offering and its grain offering and their drink offerings. So 7th month, we've had a big deal on the first day of the month to commemorate this is the 7th month. Now, on the 10th day of the 7th month is another convocation that's been called. So God's calling them together again. So depending on how the calendar works, this is at least potentially your 3rd day off in a week and a half, depending how the holiday and the Sabbath falls on the calendar. So lots of things going on in the 7th month. What's new to this one, for the moment anyway, is that verse 7 says that they were called to afflict themselves. To afflict themselves. Doesn't spell out exactly what that means, so just for a little guidance here to think through it, this idea of affliction is, think self-flagellation, punishing yourself for your sin. In other words, these actions, whatever you're afflicting is meant to be, use a Catholic term here, penitential. Right? Think penitentiary, where you're sent to be punished. Penitential, this is what doing penance in Catholic theology is all about, is paying the cost of your crime. So think about it. They've had all these sacrificial animals and all the atonement offerings, and now they've got to afflict themselves. Because what they're trying to do is pay for their sins. Pay for their crime, so to speak. So what does that tell you about all the other ones already? Didn't cut it. Verse 8, it's going to sound very familiar. Instead of working, bring another burnt offering. So here we go again. The number of animals, the bulls, the ram, the lambs, the goat, same as the Feast of Trumpets. So that decreased number. And again, all of them are to be without blemish. God always expecting perfection, always getting the best. Verses 9 and 10 reiterate what we've just said in the previous paragraph. Grain offering is to be included. There's always a grain offering included. Sometimes Moses mentions it, sometimes he doesn't. Here he wants to make sure we see it. So the grain offering with its oil, which is not mentioned. Then verse 11, we have the atonement offering again. And he repeats again that all of this is in addition to the regular daily offering. Sir. The ESV calls it the Day of Atonement. It's Yom Kippur. Yeah. Except in this case, it goes on for more than one day. It goes on and on and on. And some of you are going, okay, but with these sacrifices, what are we doing? We're going on and on. Now you're getting the point. So for the Day of the Atonement, Yom Kippur, here's what we do. in addition to all the other regular offerings we're doing on those days. So again, at least your daily offering on top of this. And if it happened to fall on a Sabbath, the Sabbath offerings on top of all this. So again, the blood is flowing in the streets, so to speak. Now, verse 12 and following. I'm not going to read it all. I'm just going to kind of highlight some things. I'll read the first paragraph starting verse 12, and then we'll just kind of highlight some things along the way. This is how we're able to do a whole chapter tonight, because it's reiterating, redundant, same information over and over. So verse 12, on the 15th day, so 5 days later, on the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work, and you shall keep a feast to the Lord 7 days. And you shall offer a burnt offering, a food offering, with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. 13 bulls from the herd, 2 rams, 14 male lambs a year old. They shall be without blemish. And the grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 for each of the 2 rams, and 1/10 for each of the 14 lambs. Also, 1 male goat for a sin offering, besides the regular burnt offering, its grain offering, and its sin offering. Let's go ahead and read the next paragraph so you can just kind of see how the pattern flows. On the 2nd day, so it's the 16th of the month, 12 bulls from the herd, 2 rams, 14 male lambs a year old without blemish, with the grain offering and the drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, for the lambs, in the prescribed quantities. Also 1 male goat for a sin offering, besides the regular burnt offering and its grain offering, and their drink offerings. So you're kind of picking up what's going on throughout this. So let's kind of walk our way through that first paragraph at length, and then we'll just kind of summarize what comes after that. So here we go. Same month, 7th month. Now you got a new feast for us. For them, they're familiar with it, I'm sure, already. But now they've got what's called the Feast of Booths. Feast of Booths. Some Bible translations call it the Feast of Tabernacles. Same thing. I worked with an Orthodox Jew when we lived in St. Louis, lots of Jewish people in St. Louis. Her family practiced this every year in the 7th month. And I said, what are you all doing? They put up a tent in the backyard and live in the tent for these 7 days. So that's what I mean by booths, right? Think temporary shelter as you're moving along. And what it's doing, of course, is highlighting Israel's time where? In the wilderness. As they're moving towards their final communion with God, it's temporary. And this is to remind them so that even once they get to Jerusalem one day, once they get to Israel, they don't forget this journey. Right? You know, so many modern Americans hate history. They don't want to talk about history. You know, oh, that's history so boring. Whatever. I mean, I take a little personal offense to it, but whatever. But we try to act like history's irrelevant. And anybody who's got any history behind him knows it's not irrelevant. And everything we're dealing with right now in the Middle East is the product of at least the last 47 years, and probably add another 20 years on top of that when we basically toppled the previous regime and put the Shah in charge, and back that up a little further and put the British there in charge of the oil, and you get the picture. God in the Bible wants to make sure we understand there's a history behind what we believe and do. And this is why I cringe. I hear students say it a little bit, and they picked it up from their parents or their grandparents. So it's their fault. You know, Dr. Beck, all this stuff, all this theology, all that's good, but it's not that important. We just need to take a leap of faith. You take a leap of faith because you know the history proves that it's a safe leap. You don't just take a leap of faith and hope God's out there, which is what the guy who first came up with that saying in the 1800s meant. I think it's bogus. I think it's wrong. History matters. And so they're to be reminded once they get into the land of this experience. And so once a year, they go live in their backyard for a week to remind them of this experience. And it started, this feast, basically with the full moon on the 15th of the month. Remember, the first day of the month is the new moon, so it's coming up, it's waxing. The feast starts with the height of the moon. That day, another holy convocation is called. So in addition to the weekly Sabbath, in addition to the Yom Kippur, in addition to the first day, here's another convocation. And yet again, we're reminded that on that day, all work halted. This day is given to God. Now, what makes this one a little different from what we've seen is this feast goes on for 7 days. So think of the picture of 7 as a picture of a week. Also think about 7 as the number for completion. There's probably a lot of symbolism wrapped up in all this stuff going on in this particular description, these days of the feast. And big picture, he lays out what the feast is going to look like, or the offering that day. Verse 13, there's going to be another burnt offering that was meant to be a pleasing aroma to God. Do this, be obedient, and God will be pleased. Right? It's not just about the smoke, it's about God being pleased when we obey. Now, hopefully you noticed when I read it out loud, unlike the previous ones, with this one, the number of animals increased. So instead of 2 bulls, 13 are slaughtered on the first day. 2 rams in the place of just 1. And rather than 7 lambs, this offering utilized 14. And we could get into numbers and what does 13 represent. Don't get too far into numerology. But think about the fact that the numbers are increasing on this occasion. It's highlighting the fact that there's great significance on this occasion, right? So we think about Passover being the high day of the year. Then we think about Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur is the second highest day of the year. But in many ways, the Feast of Booths, half a week later, is actually more significant. Multiples of the animals, over and over and over. And every one of them had to be perfect. All had to be without blemish. And with the increase in the animals, verses 14 and 15 point out the amount of grain increased significantly. So compared to all the other offerings we've looked at in the last chapter and a half, this one, just this one day alone, blows the others out of the water. And it's setting up a week's worth of these things. What is odd in this paragraph of increasing numbers, verse 16, only 1 goat is needed to provide the atonement offering. So everything's going up, but what do we really ultimately need? 1 atonement. Now, of course, we say that, but what's going to happen on the next 6 days? Atonement offering, atonement offering, atonement offering, atonement offering. What happened just 5 days earlier? Atonement offering. What happened 10 days before that? Atonement offering. Obviously, they're not needing an atonement offering every week or every day. What they need is the one singular atonement offering. Right? They've already had the scapegoat. He's been sent into the wilderness. He didn't solve it. This is why the writer of Hebrews talks about the fact that they just blood of bulls and goats, and every day now you're reading it. Now you're going, that's why the author of Hebrews says that. Because it's just redundant. It's repetitive. It's still just 1 goat, because we're looking for the goat. And then Moses includes, here as he ends this paragraph, that all other sacrifices also continued as normal. So you had your daily offering that day as well. plus your sin offerings, whatever else might have been going on. So lots and lots and lots of blood flowing. And then he walks us through the next 6 days. That's what the rest of the chapter almost is entirely about. I didn't feel the necessity to go through and repeat every one of those lines. What I want you to notice as we go through it real quick, I already read chapter 29, verses 17 through 19. We could do it with all the other days, is I want you to notice two things happening. Chapter 29, verse 17, 19. Essentially, the same offering is repeated on the second day. Note I say essentially because it's not exactly the same. Because what happens on day 2? The number of bulls offered drops to 12. Now, why did he start with 13? It's not explained in the text. Is it the 11 tribes plus Joseph's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim? Doesn't say, so we can't go there. But 12 is significant, isn't it? The next paragraph, verses 20 to 22, what do we have? You all can fill this part out. It's essentially the same offering, except now the number of bulls drops to 11. Now you got the pattern. Verses 23 to 25, essentially the same offering. Number of bulls drops to 10. So we're getting less and less. Verses 26 to 28, essentially the same offering on day 5. Number of bulls drops to 9. If we were reading all those paragraphs, hopefully you would be picking up on those decreasing numbers. There's something significant going on with that. We've had more animals than the other day, but now they're getting less and less each successive day. Verses 29 to 31, essentially the same offering. They're on the 6th day. Now we're down to the number of bulls being 8. Verses 32 to 34, hopefully you've already got this one written out. Essentially the same offering, except now the number of bulls is 7. 7 is the number of completion. The sacrifices are complete. And of course, he doesn't mention in those paragraphs, but what's always included every day. The goat for the atonement offering is always there. Always the one. So the picture seems to be it's going to be complete at the end of time. 7 days, 7 years, whatever, things you want to kind of make the 70 come equal to. But we're going down, but always the same thing involved. And then the last paragraph that kind of summarizes this string of the Feast of Booths, verses 35 to 38. How does the feast end? What's it conclude with? Look down at verses 35 and 38. What do we have again? Solemn assembly, the holy convocation, the gathering of the saints, the assembly. But if you are looking at 35 to 38, I want you to notice something else. So I'm going to read this paragraph for you. On the 8th day, you shall have a solemn assembly. You shall not do any ordinary work. Should sound all very familiar now. But you shall offer a burnt offering, a food offering, with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 male lambs without blemish, and the grain offering and the drink offerings for the bull, for the ram, for the lambs, in the prescribed quantities. Also 1 male goat for a sin offering, besides the regular offering, and its grain offering, and its drink offering. Notice we've got another holy assembly at the end of the week, and the number of sacrifices that day, the specifics, return to normal. 1 bull, 1 lamb or ram, and then the 7 lambs. So something about that week is like a peak assembly. And now we've come down. And all the other normal sacrifices and offerings, the daily offerings, also continue. Now, let's look at verse 39, because it's summarizing all of 28 and 29. These, so it's talking about all these offerings, you shall offer to the Lord at your appointed feasts, in addition to your vow offerings and your free will offerings, for your burnt offerings and for your grain offerings, and for your drink offerings and for your peace offerings. So as I've reiterated over and over, because Moses does, all of those special offerings mentioned here and in 28 and 29, all are done in addition to all the other regular offerings prescribed elsewhere in the Pentateuch. So in addition to the daily, the monthly, the weekly, sin offerings, peace offerings, free will offerings, your harvest offerings, all this is in addition to that. It's a heavy burden they can't ultimately keep. What do they do when they get sent into exile? How do they do it? How do they do it without a tabernacle or a temple? All those things remain unsolved unless you go, no, there's already been the one goat. It's already been resolved. The sacrifice given once for all. Otherwise, ask your Jewish friends or co-workers, neighbors, what's your hope? Prayers, and that one day God will do all this for us. And your answer is, God's already done all this for you. You've overlooked for whatever reason. It's already been taken care of. Everything it pointed to has already been resolved. And then verse 40. So here's a conclusion. So Moses told the people of Israel everything just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And the picture is, with Moses, the Israelites did what? Everything. How? As God commanded. Now, of course, it's a big statement. We know that because we know the rest of the story. Moses did his job. He told them. What would they have done? They probably were really faithful for a little while, and then what happened? They got tired of it. It's too much work. They brought their defective animals. This is what Jesus gets angry about. You want to make Jesus mad? Bring defective offerings and charge people for them. It just became going through the motions. But for the moment, as they're there in the land, or not in the land, they're in Moab looking across the river at the land, everything finally now seems good. The finally we get, because we've been 40 years getting here, seems is the operative word, isn't it? It's not really good. Because we know some of the people don't even want to go into the land. We know some of them are already intermarrying with the pagans around them. But God, the point is over and over, is very good. No, it's just part of the Feast of Booths. Just kind of the wrapping up the whole thing. All right, don't forget Sunday, in Romans chapter 8, like I was foreshadowing this past week, the answer to the struggle Paul is admitting in chapter 7. He's hinted at it. Chapter 8, the whole chapter, explains how God has done these things. Also, don't forget Sunday evening is our monthly fellowship. What's the theme this week? Or summer picnic or something to that effect. So make sure if you haven't already looked at that, make sure you check the bulletin board. Deacon nominations, we got one more week for that. So if you haven't already nominated, prayerfully think about that. And then also think about the pastoral search committee nominations. Kevin and the deacons are already kind of working through that. They're going to share with you soon kind of the guidelines they're going to use to help them think through how to process who gets nominated. Because clearly we just can't have a popularity contest. Well, so-and-so got 14 nominations. Well, so-and-so is not a member. I mean, people nominate folks who sometimes aren't members. Or they nominate people that have things going on in their lives that maybe they don't know about. So the deacons are going to take the task very serious, and they want to make sure they vet the ones who get nominated, and then come back to you in August with a list of, here's the 5 based on your nominations that we think best fits what this committee needs to be. So be in prayer for that. If you haven't already nominated folks or folk, make sure you do that as well. Worst case scenario is they don't get enough nominations at all and have to kind of, no, their job is not to come up with the committee for you all. Theirs to take your desires, filter it, and build the committee, hopefully, that by consensus the church wants and needs. And as the deacons are well aware of, and before you get asked, some of you I'm sure will get asked to be on the committee, deacons are well aware of this is going to be a time-intensive, spiritually grueling exercise. And so be in prayer for those people you're nominating, that they're willing to do it if asked, and that they're up to the task. It's not one of those tasks that gets easier as it goes on. It's one of those tasks that actually get harder as it goes on. So just be in prayer for that. But if you have major nominations for either one, do that this week as well. All right, let's go ahead and pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for your goodness, your mercy. Ask, Lord, your blessings on those on our prayer list. Lord, people struggling, people dying, people dealing with death and grief. But Lord, also those dealing with the reality that death could be imminent. Lord, trying to operate and function with loved ones in harm's way. Lord, thinking about their daily duties wherever, God, you've placed them around the world. Pray, Lord, for wisdom and comfort. Pray, Lord, that you would be with this church and guide it in this nomination process, nominating those who would serve the physical needs of the church, to minister to them in that sense. And then also, Lord, those who would serve the whole church, and Lord, ultimately, hopefully, prayerfully be serving you, seeking your will for the future of this church. Pray, Lord, you would make all those people clear to those who are nominating them. Make it clear to those who are nominated, Lord, if you've called upon their lives for this purpose. And then pray, Lord, through it all that they are open and receptive to your will, and that, Lord, that you would make it clear to them as well. And as for all this, we ask and pray in Jesus' name, amen.